everyone. Today I have with me Fawn Zwickel, and I have Fawn's book. I want to see if I can get it. Here is her book called The Forgotten Soldier, sorry. And because I'm trying to read it off backwards, but anyway, I am so happy that this is going to become a physical book, Fawn, but I am so happy you came to talk to me. I am so excited because I loved your book so much. So much.
Thank you.
First of all, I have to tell you that when I started reading it, I find these books, I look up different genres, and I try to mix it up with everybody. And when I found it, I read nothing about you. I just read the book, right? Because that's just how I am. And when I get to the end and I see that it was your grandfather, I started crying. I was like, oh my God. I knew it was a true story. And so I'm thinking, okay, you found this guy that's still alive that can give you all these details, because your book, I have studied a lot on D-Day, but the details in your book were just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
Yeah, they're literally all his accountings. It's from his perspective, everything that he went through. And I intentionally did it that way because when he would talk about it to me, it was a reality check and a really big eye-opener, because when I was a kid, and I remembered studying World War II, and also, the Holocaust for that matter, we never went into detail of what it was like to physically be in that space at that time, having to face that, and yet alone, the education was far different 70 years ago, of course, when they were growing up. But, it was an eye-opener to see what war does to a person. And, it wasn't until 70 years later that he really started opening up more, because he does have the early onsets of dementia. And, with his blessing, he basically said, yes, I want to talk about this now. And it was just important. My children have watched Saving Private Ryan 5 times. And one is 13 and one's going to be 12. And it really resonates and hits home, not just because he's our family, but because, there were so many other men that never spoke about this with their families, that, I think that it would connect our generations to them. And, to realize what kind of person it takes to be faced with everything they were faced and yet still come out the greater for it. And I just think it's huge. So I've been trying to push this book and his story, basically to schools, to anyone that would, listen, because it's not just the fact that the war happened and what happened strategically within the war to the Allies. It was just the fact that, you had these boys coming from farmlands to the inner cities, their education totally different than what we know of now. And yet they were full problem solvers. They figured it out. They did it. They worked together as a team. And they did it. They conquered it, right? And I feel like our generation today can learn a lot of values, a lot of core values that are just the moral fabric of our country. But, they can learn a lot by what they did and the standards that they held. And they weren't all great, don't get me wrong. They did a lot too, but they stuck together. And it was just amazing. And the fortitude that they had was just obscene and fierce. And, today I just wish that our kids that are learning of these battles and learning of these wars would place themselves inside of it with the soldier that they're going through it, and not look at it like, oh God, this is a textbook and this is, okay, we got it. The date was, this happened with, whom, and that's all it was. It was just a bunch of figures and numbers. It never resonated, and it's unfortunate. So I'm just happy that this book, that we did, it was in his perspective. People walk through and go through in his shoes. And there are certain things in there that he never thought, he just did it. It was a reaction.
Right.
And those are things that you when you're reading some books, you don't fully get. So I'm happy that, you were able to read it and feel like you were with him. That's huge.
Well, I don't know if your sons have watched Band of Brothers, the miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
They have, okay, because that's where I learned. I interviewed the guy who wrote the screenplay for it. And that was my real, like, when I started to study D-Day. Because, like you said, I'm 52. We didn't really study this. It was like a date. Oh, and then D-Day happened, and then other things happened, and then, we're done. World War II's over. But when I had to watch Band of Brothers, I understood a little bit more. But reading your book, I'm really happy I watched Band of Brothers like 6 months ago. And then reading your book, so I was a little bit more familiar with some of the things that happened. But your grandfather's 95, is that right?
He just turned 96.
I mean, there's just because Band of Brothers took that, those people that went from there till the end. There aren't that many people alive that went from D-Day to where he did in the forest, and then make it to the concentration camps, and then make it home. The numbers are small, and for him to still be alive, I don't even know. I'm sure maybe you know a little bit better, but those numbers are even smaller. I mean, it's so good that you got this story, because I knew a guy, a friend of mine that I grew up with. Her dad was there, okay, but all he did was liberate the concentration. But you know what I'm saying. He was only there for that part of it, and he did not talk about it until he was about 5 years from when he died. He said to his granddaughter, okay, I'm going to talk about it. And then she did a video of him. But what was it about them? Like, they didn't want to come home and be these heroes, even though they were heroes. Why didn't they? Did you know? Do you ever ask him that?
Well, it's funny. It's like, when you talk to these gentlemen that are in their 90s, it's amazing. So I volunteer, just really quick. I volunteer down at the VA at Lyons now because I wanted to do something to give back. The story really shook me. And like I said, I mean, it's my grandfather. Right. But on the flip side, I still felt I needed to do more, right? So after talking to a lot of them, and I keep thinking that it's my grandfather, and he's just like this, and he blows it off, and he was like, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, and that's how he was like. When he came home, he was like, just got down to it, started working, tried to figure it out, struggled through it, obviously. But, you talk to these gentlemen of that generation or roundabouts, and the interesting thing is they have this secret sauce in them, right? It's amazing when you just talk to them that, no, they didn't do it for any glory. They didn't do it for anything else other than country and to protect their own. But they just have this sternness about them that is something that is, I don't know, it's not artificial. It's so ingrained in them and so real that it's palatable. You can touch it. It's when you talk to them. And it's pretty interesting. So, I always thought it was just him, but it's not. It's that generation. And I guess it's just the way they were brought up. But, I can't explain it any other way other than it's just they have it, and it's something that I feel that our kids should get. It's not an entitlement. I'm not saying that, but it's something that they should learn from and say, oh my God, I want to be like that. Like, I want that. Like, not the next video game, not the next iPhone, not something that's so materialistic. I want what that person has. I want that sauce, that thing, right?
Right. That character. So. That character. And when I was reading it, what I was understanding and what you brought out so well in his character was that he understood that any day, like, it was almost his last day. Like, there was nothing different than what he did than the guy sitting next to him. He knew that it was, and he kept preparing himself almost because he knew that one bullet, one shrapnel, one something, and even when they were in the forest, like, freezing to death, and, some people froze to death, other people did not freeze to death. Like, it's almost like he had that awareness, even though he was so young. He was only like 24 when D-Day happened, and yet he knew there was no, he was watching people die all around him. So being alive that day was like a gift, and then being alive the next day, a gift, because it could be him,
Yeah, I mean, as we started, as I started learning more of his story, and I basically had to go back into his history, not just with him talking about it, but I needed to know if he was telling me the right things and accurately, and he was. It was like it all happened yesterday for him. So comparing everything and researching everything, yeah, I mean, it was luck. If you look at the numbers and you look at the wars themselves, that's why I had to put the figures in there.
Right.
It was a lot of it. I'd like to say it was, oh my God, he was this great soldier. You know what? He fooling so many people if he said he wasn't scared shitless, right? And he used to tell me, he was like, there's no atheist in a foxhole. There's, you know, I mean, everybody could have their different religions. Everybody can have their different beliefs as a whole, but it was so personable when it could have been your last breath. And, yeah, I mean, it was just amazing that he was never a godly man to begin with. And yet he's writing in this Bible that you think sometimes could be sacrilegious. And, yeah, he basically wrote down, you know, as much as he could when he could. But yeah, it was like every day was his last day. Every minute was his last minute. But statistically, it was pretty amazing how even in the Hurricane Forest, that 90% casualties between the beach of his unit and then also the forest, not counting the skirmishes that happened in between in Normandy. It's just a wow factor. It's remarkable that by the numbers that he made it. That's just the God-given truth. That's right. It's luck.
Right.
You know, you never know if a bullet has your name on it or if a piece of shrapnel is going to land in the wrong spot and hit I mean, you don't know. But those little things and the things that he's seen, you know, like we're sitting there watching the 4th of July fireworks, of course, and we're sitting next to each other. And I'm just like thinking to myself, this to me sounds like war right now. Like, I don't think I can ever listen to fireworks and think of them the same anymore. Because I had him right next to me, and he was just talking about nothing but the Hurricane Forest. So, you know,
right. Like to be, you know, we can't imagine. We just can't imagine. But when I found out that he was your grandfather, my first thought was like, oh my God, she wrote about her. Like, that's just amazing. And then I was like, wait a second, that means Rita is her grandmother. Like,
yes. So I got my grandfather's blessing to do this book, and there was always this very weird relationship in his family, as you read the book, right? Right. And that's airing a little bit of laundry. There's no doubt about it. Right. But it also shows how, you know, no one's perfect, right? In Hollywood, you never see, when you look at the actors, you never see how they are, or I should say the dynamic between the family and what happens. But in the real world, you know, that boy comes home and he's got to face his family and what happens. So what was funny was my grandmother, after, you know, reading the book, and she's like, I never knew more than half the stuff you put in there because you never spoke about it.
Wait, but she's still alive too?
Huh? She's still alive. Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just...
No, they're a hoot together, I'll tell you. Oh boy. But yeah, she was just, after reading it, she was like, you know what, you put some things in there that I'm kind of uncomfortable with. I said, you know what, that's your generation. That's something, because you guys always kept quiet about things. Right. Nobody ever talked about anything. You know, nowadays it is it's a lot more loose. You talk about everything. Right. But I think it was important for people to see this side of the story. This is the most crucial side to anyone coming home. And I'm angry at myself, truthfully, that I never paid more attention. And after writing this book, had I do it all over again, you know, maybe my life would have been a whole lot different because of the sacrifices he made. I feel like, you know, I should have made those too. Right. Like, it's just, you know, but yeah, it was just.
I know. And I think that how you wrote her, like, his coming home, she made it. Like, you know, I don't know. I haven't read anything quite like their relationship. So, but, you know, the way she was like, yeah, you know, I'm sure you are going through this stuff, so let's do this. You know, like, she was very matter of fact about, like, you know, he was trying to come to terms with some of the things he was going through. And she was like, that's okay. Like, it's okay, but let's just try this, or let's just do this, or, you know, well, let's not remember that, you know.
I basically just track them. Or, I mean, hey, listen, even in the Hurricane Forest, the one letter that will always go down in infamy is basically that one letter where she's talking about how she's cleaning up a dead person in the hospital, preparing. And, my grandfather is surrounded by, all his boys are, it was just, and all the guys around him they were laughing. It's like, how could you not? There are just some things where it's like, are you serious? Where's she coming from? But it was just what they had. I don't know. I still can't understand it, but obviously it's been working because they've been together 70 plus years.
I was going to say, my grandparents were together 60, I don't think they made 65, but it was like 63 or somewhere around there. So, yeah, your parents is like, your grandparents is like 70. I mean, what do you say to that? Especially in this day and age, like that's incredible. And I'm so happy she's still alive. Like I'm so happy that they're still together. And because like I said, that was what I loved about the story. First of all, how I don't want to give stuff away, but like how she gets him to marry her, like that was pretty cool. And, that was a cool story. I love that. And then even how his brother was over there, like he's going through all this stuff. He gets to where his brother is and his mom's like all worried about his brother. And he's like, okay.
There are a lot of families, I'm sure that as well, where there are certain siblings that definitely take favoritism, like within the family, and that's something that humanizes the story more, where it's not like taking this one man and propping him up on a pedestal. I mean, he's human. Right. He feels like he's been, he does get mistreated and in a way disrespected by his family, but yet still he doesn't show or doesn't, I don't know. I mean, he does kind of lash out to them, but then he has remorse about it. He apologizes for it. So there is a level of anger. But yeah, I mean, it was the fact that he got out to see his brother and had no idea. Yeah. And he was kind of his brother victim. But yeah, I mean, they were brothers, but yeah, the middle one definitely was prized as the daughter of the family. Let's put it that way.
Well, it was, like I said, there's so much about this story, but I just love the fact, like I said, I hope this is made into a movie. You have no idea how much I hope that. Because besides some of the other things I've seen, and I was watching some stuff this weekend on YouTube, in preparation for this to refresh my memory, but really the detail that you got from him is just not out there. I feel like it's, like some of the guys they interviewed for some documentaries, but I mean, his story is so, like you said, even when you fact checked it, like it's so real and it's so, detailed that I'm like, this needs to get out there. But do you remember, and you're younger than me, but Steven Spielberg was putting together like all these World War II vets back in the 90s, I want to say. Was your grandfather a part of that?
No. We tried to get, back in the 90s, my parents had gotten him down to what was the World War II Museum now. Right. I forgot what it's called, then, but, and he was then interviewed with a student, and the repository of the interview was supposed to be at the World War II Museum, but then when I tried to find it again recently, they said it never made it there, and it was kind of lost, but it was, part of it, I guess, was stored in the Library of Congress in the archives under folklore, which that got me to stew really bad.
That's weird.
So, yeah, then I basically tracked down the people from the World War II Museum who, the interviewer was Hannah Daly, who was absolutely wonderful. She was great with him when he would start to veer off because he would just bring up stuff out of the blue or in disorder. She would bring him back to track and so she was a great interviewer. But yeah, we got him down there, and that was pretty much it.
So his video is down at the World War II? It is. Yeah. I'm telling you, I don't know how to call Steven Spielberg. I'm like, well, we should just call Steven Spielberg and tell him, because no, he made that. I don't even know. Like, I bet there is a website or something, because he was making these like back in the 90s, he was finding all these World War II vets because they were starting to die off, and he was making this big thing for them. And I don't even know exactly. I'm going to look because I'm telling you, like he's still.
It could have also been to basically get the accountings to formulate Saving Private Ryan, because Saving Private Ryan, after my grandfather saw that, he basically said that that was the closest out of all the movies that he's ever seen. That was the closest. That, you know, but he was like, that was even wrong. I'm like, what? You know? What do you mean it was wrong? He was like, you know, and he basically said, he was like, because, you know, the one thing that was the probably the main help or the assistance, the only thing that got us to really win the day was that destroyer that came in behind us. And had he not broke protocol and basically broke the line to come in, beach, and then come back out and turn around and fire, first was the aft guns, and then the forward guns, then turned around and did the aft guns. Had they not done that, they would have gotten no cover, because of, you know, there were no, the tanks, there were only like a handful of tanks, not even, that made it ashore for the second wave. And even realizing what happened with that, my grandfather was just like, you know, it beyond sad and such a waste that our intelligence, our people that came up with these great, you know, they had the Sherman tanks, but then, you know, they had these screens that basically were supposed to float them. And they tested them in this placid lake. And when have you ever thought a channel to be anywhere near a placid lake?
Right?
So, yeah. So these poor men, and I guess it was, you know, it's more like a tribute to them that their sacrifice was like, you know, it was done in vain. So had they not secured the beaches, all those men that were in those tanks that just needlessly drowned because of sheer stupidity, that they didn't think, you know, that 6-foot swells wouldn't, you know, flood a tank because the screens wouldn't be able to hold that. I don't know. There were just some things as I was doing research and as I was, you know, then checking back with him, he was just like, it was a total shit show. And the funny thing is, you'll see some movies or some documentaries where you've got these men that there was one guy, you know, I mean, did X, Y, and Z, like, you know, but everybody was just scared shitless. Right. Everybody. Right. And finally, when they figured out how to do the Bangalore torpedo, because they have to basically piecemeal it together on site, his group was the second group to blow their hill. So, or blow the bluffs. Right. So, I mean, I said to my grandfather, I'm like, that's no insignificant feat right there. Right. That's huge. I mean, to explain what that's like to assemble this piece. So, just circling around and bringing back to the museum, my husband and I went down, and I'm looking, and they put up this amazing exhibit on the Higgins boat, and then also what it was like within the Hyrcan forest, and then also the hedgerows. That was a huge thing. So, but just to see the Bangalore torpedo that, you know, is these little pieces that you have to basically put together. And, you know, just to know how much he's holding on his body or on his person, it was like 75 pounds of pack. And then to now couple this with a piece of torpedo, you're still holding a Tommy or an M1. Right. Like, you know, just listening to all this and you're under enemy fire. Right. You know, I just, like, it was crazy.
You know, and even I was watching a documentary that this morning, they were saying that before they left, they decided to feed them this huge meal, right? Yeah. And then they didn't realize, like, they get there, they're seasick. And then they have to jump, and these guys were jumping off the side of the boats because they were getting shot at. And the one guy was saying, like, he was underwater throwing up, like, from seasickness, and then has all this pack on. He's drowning. He's, you know, like, nobody thought any of this stuff out very well. You know, like, what the human toll, what they were going to be faced with, what they, you know, their bodies needed, what their, you know. And the one guy that helped everybody else, all he had was a candy bar that day.
Yes.
And he was, like, helping out all these other people. I was like, that is something that, you know, it's something that maybe we would pay attention to today, but back in 1944, not so much. People were
right. Right. I totally agree.
You know.
I'm about to lose power, so give me 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Oh, that's okay.
There.
I always have to make sure. But yeah, I mean, Fawn, just your writing of it. I mean, I know he told the stories, but you had to write it, and that was that's what I really want people to understand when they're reading this. Like, it's not easy to take all these stories and put them in a way that makes sense and that draws you in and deeper into the story. And the way you did it with he's facing this, and then he'd be thinking about, that, a memory trigger, because that is how our brains go. Like, when I was reading it, I was thinking, how many times are you involved in something and your brain's like, oh, remember that time that my mom, like...
Yeah, and it makes you more human. It's not like you're solely focused, yes, you're solely focused on your battle and everything you have to try to live through. But the thing is, in those small, precious moments of the downtime, that's the biggest thing. So, like I said, it gives perspective. So even with my grandmother, she was just like, I had no idea.
Right.
Because all their letters were looked over. So it's not like you could write anything important or, I actually felt bad for them.
You know what? I was actually impressed with the fact that they were getting mail, and mail was going out at a lot of those times. Like, that in itself, I was really thankful that at least they were getting mail. There were times that they could get mail. There was times that they could get mail out, because I'm picturing like some guy delivering the mail, and that's a dangerous job too, just getting the mail to them,
Yes, definitely. So, but again, I'm just happy that we were able to do it. I'm happy that, it needed to be told in his perspective. Because, being a kid from, the city and not having the education that everybody else had, it's showing that what a person can really do if they put their mind to it. It's, I don't know. I mean, even with family issues, that things happen, and it's like you can either face them and get through them, or you can crawl in a hole. But you crawl in a hole, no one's, it's not going to mean very much.
Right.
So I'm happy that after all these years where he was just kind of like, he got by, right?
Yeah.
And he never wanted the accolades, and it's not why I did this. But I was angry, and it's funny. This all started with my daughter's genealogy project, truthfully. And I was angry because we had gotten his war record from the National Personnel Record. Down in Maryland, and in 1973 there was a fire, and the archives were incinerated. And of course, in 73 you're allowed to go to work with a cigarette or whatever.
Right.
So, fire goes through. His records are, for the most part, they're incinerated, especially the important part, like where the accomplishments and the medals, the honors, whatever, and accommodations. I mean, before he came home, it was Chief Justice Black who was like, "You ready to go home, soldier? How many points do you have?" That's when he went home, because he was like, "I've got 175 points."
Yeah.
So, and he was done because, he wanted to kick the shit out of Stryker, and he'd kill him if basically, he was just like, "I'd rather take myself away from the situation because I know it's just not going to be good." But, I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, he never sought anything other than just to have some peace. So now I'm like, I'm upset because they listed him on his records as this private first class when he came home. And I'm like, but Grandpa, you were a sergeant. You came home with your stripes. You came home with all the artifacts you wanted to, and you were listed as a sergeant. So basically, I'm still on this path of trying to get some answers for him and trying to get his war record fixed and not rewritten, but modified to say sergeant versus private first class. Because I'm like, you earned that rank. They shouldn't be able to take that away from you. And yes, he did stupid things when he was in the Army before he went overseas. Because of course there was a lot of anti-Semitism.
Right.
So, they never let him get away with anything.
Right.
So, yes, he was broke like 3 times, but he made sergeant 3 times. So, he always got his rank back. But he never got higher than sergeant because, he was still... Yeah, I mean, it was tough.
I thought they were kind of funny anyway. I mean, I had 2 sons in the service, and I kind of got a, kick out of it, because it was like, can you imagine even during that time? And then they're like, oh, okay, we're taking a stripe away from you. Okay, go ahead. Like,
Right, exactly. But thank you for your son's service. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've actually made it a point where whenever we're out, even as a family, I'll literally stop to veterans and say thank you. And there's a reason why, like, they wear their hats in recognition. They wear certain paraphernalia to let people know that they served.
Absolutely. And my one son was in Iraq. I mean, and he was in a not very fun time in Iraq. And he's 28 now, but, he's very, very sentimental about the Army. Like, really highly sentimental, and his daughters know, like, their flag is displayed everywhere. And, he doesn't like that people take it for granted. And my other son was a Marine, and he's equally as, a Marine, so.
Understandable.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. That's why I really want kids in school to understand that, this is not a sacrifice you take lightly, and this is what happens to a person as they go through it.
Right.
And now, what's interesting is being down at the VA, I'm talking to more and more gentlemen who get more and more angry over the way they've been treated. So, just thinking about my next book and, who or what it's going to be about, I don't know. I want to advocate for what they're going through because you know what? It's very little do.
Yeah,
let's
just
put it that way.
People don't understand. As a matter of fact, my son that went to Iraq, he left the day after he graduated from high school. And people were sending their sons off to college and crying. And I was like, okay, like I'm sending my son, like, it just puts it in perspective, He could have gone to college. He had full scholarships for football and baseball. Okay. But he was like, no, I have to do my part. And that's the thing about now is these kids are not drafted. They're doing it because they feel obligated to be, to serve for their country. So,
right.
It is, and there were days I wish he wouldn't have felt so strongly about it, but, that's what happened. But anyway, well, thank you so much for talking with me. I could talk to you forever. And I want everybody to read this book. And let's see if I still have it up on my thing. I mean, here it is. It's A Forgotten Soldier. Please tell me when this comes out. I will I will buy it. And I will pass it around. I mean, it is an amazing book. I'm so grateful that you wrote it. Thank you so much, Fawn, for your story.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on. And any questions any of your viewers want to reach out to me,
yes, I will put the link on there. And please give your grandfather a hug for me.
I will, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.